Let's go. We did it, mama. We did it. We did it for the love of the game. We did it, mama. We did it. I did it for. Yeah.
And welcome to episode 16 of the MMA Rundown. Not a really big MMA week, pretty big Jiu-Jitsu week. That is why the lead-in song would be Jiu-Jitsu from Eddie Bravo's band Smoke Serpent. So as far as the topics that we'll be covering this week, we have the Conor McGregor interview that he had with Ariel Helwani. We have Bellator 225. They had a show this weekend, so just go through all the results on that. IBJJF, they had the Master World Championships, which is 30 plus, and they also had their heavyweight Grand Prix with a $40,000 cash prize for the winner. We have UFC China coming up next week. I'll preview that card. Yianni and Zain from USA Wrestling, they finally have a date set for when they're gonna face each other for that spot on the USA Wrestling team for the World Championships coming up in September. We have Daniel Cormier issuing an apology after his loss, also losing his father. I'll talk about both of those things. And then Demian, Maia, and Ben Askren. This is something I've been talking about for a while now. I was talking about how it'd be a great matchup a while back. Talked about it, how it looked like that matchup was going to be set. Now it is set. Now it has a date. I'll talk about that. But getting right into it, Conor McGregor. He finally decided to come out and have a big interview after last week's debacle where the video came out of him punching an old man in the face because the guy didn't want to take a shot at Proper 12. This interview, I was hoping, I mean, honestly, my expectations were about where it ended up being. I didn't expect much out of it. I was hoping to get some kind of belief at the end of it, like, okay, hey, Conor is going to be better. Because to me, whether or not you like Conor specifically, what Conor does for the sport is a positive thing. It's good to have a guy in the sport who draws the kind of attention he does. Not just because it draws attention to the cards he's on, but also the guys he fights. It also draws attention to them, especially if the guys he fights beat him. Nate Diaz became a much bigger star after beating Conor McGregor. Khabib Nurmagomedov appears to be a much bigger star now that he's beaten Conor. So even if Conor ends up losing a couple fights, it helps build some other guys. And now whoever Nate fights next is going to get a little bit of a secondary rub off of Conor. Same for Dustin Poirier. He's probably going to have a lot more attention now on him with that Khabib fight. So even if he loses, he'll get more attention than he otherwise would. So having guys who draw the kind of attention that Conor does, it's great for the sport, and also it obviously brings more money, and bringing more money in is also beneficial as well. So for me, Conor is someone who I want to have in the sport. Conor is someone who I want to see do well in the sport, because when Conor does well, that means that there's more eyes on him, and when there's more eyes on him, it trickles down throughout the sport. So I want to believe that Conor is going to get his act together. I want to believe that Conor is going to get to a point where he can become the guy who he was before, the guy who stormed through a division, won a title, moved up, won another title. He doesn't need to be champ again. If he can win a title again, though, that'd be awesome. It'd be great. It'd be great to see a bunch of big fights, to have Conor fighting a couple times a year, maybe 3 times a year. Being able to go into a workplace where people just vaguely know that I'm interested in martial arts, and any time that a Conor fight comes up, everyone wants to talk MMA. That's nice to me. Because for me, my interests are sort of limited compared to a lot of other people. I don't watch a whole lot of TV as far as like TV shows go. I don't really watch a whole lot of movies. I do watch a lot of sports, so when people are just having small talk in the office, there are a lot of times where I feel like there isn't a whole lot for me to butt in on and a whole lot for me to add. So it's nice to actually have the times come around when a Conor McGregor fight comes up and everyone wants to talk to me about MMA. Like it's neat for me. I appreciate it. I'm sure a lot of you people who are listening to a podcast like this are in a similar situation. So having Conor around is a good thing. That being said, with this interview, I was hoping that I would feel as though Conor had realized that there was an error in his ways, that he was making some major changes, and that was going to lead him back into a similar lifestyle that led him up to the top of the food chain in the first place. That he would rededicate himself to training, maybe he wouldn't be partying so much, he'd put a limit on that. I really didn't get any reason to believe that was the case. To me, it just felt like he had talked to a lawyer for a little while, they told him what to say, and that's sort of what he said. So we'll start with that interview, and the first question that Ariel Helwani asked him is regarding the incident at the bar where he ended up punching the guy. And just this apology, like the words sound nice, but to me this sounds like something that was scripted by a lawyer. It doesn't really sound like it was said in Conor's voice, and to me that's concerning. I'd like to hear it sound as though Conor was really being thoughtful and really stating what he truly feels, rather than just saying what pretty much any criminal would ever tell a judge before they were sentenced. So here's that first question and answer.
Last week, TMZ posted a video of an incident that occurred back in April of this past year where you appeared to get into an altercation with another man at a bar in Ireland. Could you tell us your side of that story? What happened there?
I mean, in reality, it doesn't matter what happened there. I was in the wrong. That man deserved to enjoy his time in the pub without having it to end the way it did. And although 5 months ago it was, and I tried to make amends, and I made amends back then, it's still, the fans don't even, that does not even matter. I was in the wrong. I must come here before you and take accountability and take responsibility. And
that phrase, "I must come here before you," it's just like, for whatever reason, it just bugs the crap out of me, because it really does like reinforce the idea that he was like coached up by a lawyer to talk in front of a judge, when in reality this is just an interview on SportsCenter with Ariel Helwani. But I guess if the legal proceedings aren't finished, then I guess he's thinking that this interview is going to be used in court, so he might as well sound like he's in court anyway. Moving along, though.
I owe it to the people that have been supporting me. I owe it to my mother, my father, my family. I owe it to the people who trained me in martial arts. That's not who I am. That's not the reason. That's not the reason why I got into martial arts or studying combat sport. The reason I got into it was to defend against that type of scenario. So to see that, and although months ago, when I have been making steps and continually making steps to do better and be better, to see it, it's like a dagger into my heart as a young martial artist. So I'm just here to own up to that and move on and carry on and face what's coming with it.
Yeah, so that was the first answer that he gave. He was then asked what he thought his punishment should be, so I'll play that answer as well and then give my take on his answer.
See what happens, and whatever comes my way, I will face it. Whatever comes my way, I deserve it. So I will face this head on. I will not hide from it. I was in the wrong. It was completely unacceptable behaviour for a man in my position. What happens, I will face.
Conor, since this...
Yeah, so again, it sort of like reinforces the idea where it's like, it sounds like he was just talking to a lawyer and just told what the best thing to say is, and then he's just sort of repeating that. So while what he's saying in theory is the right thing, it is right what I did is wrong, because what he did was wrong. It's right to say that he's going to face whatever the punishment is and learn from it. That's the right thing to do, but it doesn't feel like this is just like a natural answer from him. It feels like it was scripted, and I want to feel like I'm getting a candid interview. I want to feel like he's giving us candid answers, and that's really not the case here. And he's been in court a handful of times for different things, whether it's the Dolly incident or the other incidents that are talked about in this interview. I'm sure these are the answers he gave the judge, yet he continues to do all the wrong things anyway. So for me, it doesn't seem like there's something majorly different this time. So I have a hard time believing that he really is changing for the better. And that's unfortunate, because like I brought up before, I want him to change for the better. He can do a lot of great things for the sport, but when he's not training, when he's not at his best, he's not going to win. When he's not winning, he's not going to be as valuable, let alone the fact that he hasn't even been getting in there in the first place. But moving along, the next clip will be a question that Ariel had brought up about whether or not Conor has an anger problem, with the idea being that he had a fan who just had a phone in his face, and he felt that the necessary response was to slap it away and then take the phone. And then he had the guy who refused a shot, and he felt the necessary response was to punch him. So these are not responses that you would consider necessary. Even if you think that the guy was being an asshole by taking a picture of you, a reasonable thing to do might be to, like, hey, dude, that's not cool, put your phone away. Slapping the phone, smashing it on the ground, and taking it away is not a reasonable response. If you have a guy who refuses a shot, be like, all right, well, sorry, you don't want it, and just move along. Like, that's the reasonable response. The reasonable response isn't to, like, berate a guy or hit a guy because he doesn't want to take a shot of your whiskey. The reasonable response isn't to smash a guy's phone because he's taking a picture of you. So for him, he's asked, do you have an anger problem? And the answer he gives here doesn't seem to acknowledge that his responses weren't reasonable, more so than it just says, hey, that was a response I could have done, I should have just done nothing, rather than my response was wrong. It's more like, it almost sounds like he's like implying that his response was the right response, but that he should know better than to do it. And I don't really like that answer from him, but I'll let him answer in his own words here.
An anger problem. Is this something that you need to fix?
That was another situation a long time ago. I seem to be getting into great spaces and great like in that Miami trip. I was preparing for battle. I brought my mother out. It was her 60th birthday. I brought the whole family out. We went out, and then a situation arose. I need to just stop reacting to the bait. I've got to ask, like...
I need to stop reacting to the bait is the phrase he used. So, again, like I said, it's not as though he's being baited to give the reactions he's given. He is being baited in that people aren't exactly doing nice things to him. It's not necessarily nice to refuse a shot of whiskey if someone offers you at the bar. I mean, granted, it's not like it's a bad thing to do, but it's not like a friendly thing to do, I guess. And then taking a picture of someone isn't exactly nice, but it's not bait to then have your phone smashed and taken from you. But he is wording it as though he was baited into doing what he did, and what he did was a reasonable reaction, but he should know better than to do it. And I don't really like that framing that he's using.
People are trying to bait me into things. Am I the fish or am I the whale? I must be calm. I must be zen. I must lead by example. There's so many people looking up to me. How can I react in this way? I need to get a hold of this, and like I said, I'm working very hard to do this, and I'm taking the necessary steps, and I have been on a great trajectory. And even before the Miami incident, I was on a great trajectory, and then I had a little slip, and then I back up, and I'm just trying my hardest, Ariel. I swear on my life, I'm trying my hardest, and it's been 5 months since that one, and that's it. I just have to take what comes and move on.
Yeah, so that's his answer right there. And like I just mentioned, the fact that he looks at his response as like a somewhat reasonable response that he just should have held back rather than it being the wrong response regardless is concerning to me. But also, it seems like a lot of these times when he's getting in trouble, it's times when, at the very least, he's drinking. People would suspect that he is doing more than that. Coke would be one thing. I don't know either way. It wouldn't surprise me, but I also can't say that that's what's happening because I honestly have no idea what I'm talking about in that regard. But for him, if you're having a hard enough time not giving the kind of responses that he's giving in terms of like smacking guys up and taking their shit, getting drunk isn't going to make that any easier. It doesn't seem as though he's identified alcohol as being any sort of issue for him. The fact that he is running a whiskey company is not going to make that easy for him anyway, even if he did identify that as a personal problem for him. It's not like the guy who owns the whiskey company can say, hey, alcohol's bad, I should probably stop doing it. Or at least publicly you can't say that. So, to me, just his answer on these past crimes just isn't a very good answer to me. It doesn't seem as though he truly understands what he did is wrong. It's more just like, they got what they deserve, but I really shouldn't have done it because I'm a big guy now, and whenever I do it, I get in trouble. Like that seemed to be the answer I was getting out of him more so than what I did was wrong in general, and I need to stop doing that type of thing. And then one more clip from this before I move along. He was asked more directly about the Miami incident. I'll play that clip and his response.
As far as that incident is concerned,
that incident has been completely handled. The fan, if you want to call, it does not matter. Again, it does not matter what the person says or how the situation arose. It does not matter. I was in the wrong, and that's handled and in the past. And I'm happy now to keep moving forward and keep striving forward and focus on the positive. Like you asked me about Miami and the heckler in Miami, I would rather focus on the occasion with my family. That was an unforgettable moment to bring my mother out for her 60th birthday. I'm trying to focus on all the good in my life and recognize that I do make mistakes and learn from them, not to make them again, but still focus on the good and please, Lord, allow more of it to happen for me.
Conor.
Yeah, so again, it just doesn't feel like that great of an answer. And I think one of the funny things that came to mind is that there was that recent thing with CNN where there's that anchor Chris Cuomo who had a guy come up to him at a restaurant who called him Fredo, and it was just like he was purposely egging him on. He was also filming him the entire time, and Chris Cuomo was kind of people looked at his response as being a little over the top, and that all he really did was just talk shit back to the guy and told him that he would like push him down a set of stairs, and also had that weird line where he said that Fredo was an ethnic slur. But the point that I'm trying to get to here is that like that response, which people thought was a little bit out of line, is significantly better of a response than Conor's response of grabbing the guy's phone, slamming it on the ground, and taking it away. And again, it doesn't seem like Conor is at least admitting to the fact that his response was just an absurd and over-the-top response. To him, it almost feels like his answers are indicating that he thinks his responses were reasonable, but that he just should have held himself back. Like that it was a reasonable thing to do what he did, but he has to understand the consequences and stop himself from doing it because of the consequences. And if that's the way he thinks, then that's going to be a problem for him in general. But again, like I mentioned before, if he's under any kind of influence of drugs, it's going to make it even harder for him to hold back from what he thinks is the right thing to do. And that means that there's a good chance that something like this is going to happen again, because he's out late night, out in these sort of situations where he has fans and even detractors who want his attention. And if he thinks the right thing to do is to destroy people's property, take people's property, hit them, and he just has to stop himself from taking that instinct, there's a good chance we're going to have another problem again. So I think as far as the interview goes, like there was a lot more to it than that. They also talked about what other fights he wants when he comes back. He's talking about how he's just coming back from a hand injury right now. I'm not terribly interested in looking at that stuff right now because these divisions move a lot. We still have a title fight coming up with Khabib and Dustin Poirier. for Conor, he's going to have to get healed up first, but even after he gets healed up, it's usually long negotiations with him anyway. So for me to get concerned about who he's going to be fighting right now when it's still August, it seems like a waste of time because a lot of the division is going to change by the time he's actually ready to get back, and by the time that he is getting to the point where he's coming up with decent terms with the UFC, where he's actually willing to take a fight with them and accept the money that they're offering him. So not a whole lot for me to look at from that end, but as far as the crime side, I just really didn't get enough to believe in him from that. But now on to some actual fights. We had Bellator 225 on Saturday. The main event was Sergey Kharitonov versus Matt Mitrione. Now, the cool thing about this card is that every single fight had a finish. That includes the main event where Sergey Kharitonov won by a second round TKO over Matt Mitrione. In the co-main event, Vitaly Minakov defeated Timothy Johnson. I believe Javier Ayala was actually supposed to be in that fight, but he backed out last second and Johnson stepped in. But Minakov won by first round KO. We had Alejandro Lara versus Taylor Turner. Lara won by first round TKO. Yaroslav Amosov versus David Rickles. Amosov won by second round Darce Tyrell Fortune defeated Rudy Shafroth by rear naked choke in the second round. And then on the other card, they had Conry Gracie, who I believe is the son of Hoyce. He won by armbar in the first round. We had Aviv Ghazali with a 11-second heel hook. A little bit of an odd exchange there where he didn't touch gloves. He rolled underneath for a Imanari roll. Pretty sloppy on the roll, to be honest. Like the fact that he got the finish in 11 seconds, I think a lot of people are looking at it as a great submission, and I can't blame him for making the best of the situation he had. But it wasn't a very clean Imanari roll. He didn't have control of the guy's knee, but the guy just didn't seem to be aware of what was going on, so he just kind of let his knee hang out there, and then Ghazali was able to gather it back up and capture the heel hook from there. But I think if the other guy had any idea what he was doing on the ground, he would have been able to get out of there because it was a bit of a sloppy setup. But that being said, for Ghazali, even if you do have the sloppy setup, if you're able to kind of fix it up and capture the heel hook on the fly, that's still good on you. So good job by him to get that submission in 11 seconds. We had Sabah Hamasi with a 17-second knockout. Austin Vanderford got a doctor stoppage after the second round where he was just beating on his opponent, Joseph Creer. Ricky Bandejas with a first-round KO. We had Chris DeSanel defeating Mike Kimball by first-round TKO. That was a bit of an upset there. John Manley defeated Tiago Rella. Connor Dixon over Castriot Jima. And Nick Newell with a big win in the first-round arm triangle win over Corey Browning. And it seems as though Newell, in getting that victory, is likely to get a longer-term contract with Bellator. So, big win for him. It looks like he's finally going to get a chance on a bigger show. World Series of Fighting wasn't the biggest show when he was on there, but he had his chance with the Tuesday Night Contender Series, lost on that show. UFC doesn't seem to have any interest in him now. But Bellator brought him in for one fight. He got the win, and it seems like Bellator may be willing to keep him along or keep him around a little bit longer. So that's pretty good to see. On to Jiu-Jitsu. We had the Master Worlds, and we also had the IBJJF Heavyweight Grand Prix. I'll start with the Grand Prix. So this event was initially going to be just gigantic. They had a lot of really big names on it, but most of them dropped off. So they had Gordon Ryan on it. He dropped off. Buchecha dropped off. Yuri Samois dropped off. Mateus Diniz recently dropped off. They had a lot of really good people who were supposed to be on this that dropped off. But even still, they still had a lot of really good guys that hung around. So in the opening round, we had Joao Gabriel Rocha versus Patrick Gaudio. Rocha won that match by decision. We had Vinicius Tractor Ferreira versus Luis Panza. Vinicius won that match. We had Lucas Barbosa, Hulk versus Tim Spriggs. That match was a 12-0 win for Barbosa, although it was mostly, for the most part, it was a wrestling match. Barbosa got the takedown, was up 2-0, and then Spriggs had to open up just to try to find a way to come back, and while he was opening up, that's when Barbosa, who was excellent on top, was able to pass his guard a few times and racked up the points and ended up winning that fight 12-0. And then Roberto Cyborg Abreu defeated Victor Hugo, another late replacement, by a score of 4 advantages to 0 and 0-0. In the semifinals, we had Joao Gabriel Rocha versus Vinicius Ferreira. Rocha won that match 5-0. In the other semi, we had Cyborg Abreu versus Lucas Barbosa, which ended up turning into a really odd wrestling match. Now, with the way that the rules work in Jiu-Jitsu, if you are going in on a takedown and someone flees the mat, you can still, in some cases, be rewarded the 2 points, but then also the guy who's fleeing the mat gets penalized. So the way this match worked out is both guys had 2 takedowns. It was 2 takedowns apiece. For Barbosa, when he got his takedowns and he finished them inside the boundaries. Whenever Cyborg was going for his takedowns, he didn't completely finish them, and as Barbosa was evading, he was also evading towards the edge of the mat. So what happened both times when Cyborg went for his takedowns is that he got 2 points for the takedown and which wasn't technically finished. But then he also got the penalty scored against Barboza because Barboza was fleeing the mat to avoid it. So in the end, it's 2 takedowns apiece, but because of the 2 penalties that Barboza had while defending the takedowns, Cyborg ends up getting the win here. And then in the final, Cyborg versus Joao Gabriel Rocha was another wrestling-based match. It looked as though it was going to a ref's decision, and that Cyborg was likely to get the win there because he was a little bit more aggressive on the feet than Joao was. So Joao decided after he had defended a takedown and had a front headlock position on Cyborg that he would he would go down to his back, try to finish the guillotine, even though it wasn't really under the chin. In doing so, he lost the guillotine. Cyborg made some attempts to pass from there, and I think really in that sequence, it really cemented the fact that Cyborg was doing more offensively to attempt to score points, and in doing so, he was able to get the ref's decision and win the entire thing. So Cyborg wins 40 grand. Joao Gabriel Rocha gets 10 grand, and that pretty much covers it for that event. We also had Master Worlds. So the way that it works for Jiu-Jitsu, for the World Championships, they have one event that's just the World Championships that's usually around May, and that's adult, so that could be anyone under 30, but if you're over 30 and you want to compete in the adult class, you're allowed to. You're allowed to compete down but not up, so if you're 28 years old, you can't compete in the 30-plus class, but if you're 38 years old, you can compete in the in the 18 to 30 class, if you get what I'm saying. So the adult worlds are the really big ones. Those are the ones where if you win that world championship, like that's the biggest deal. Those are the guys who oftentimes are looked at as the ones who people want to see jump into MMA right away. But for Master Worlds, it's still a very big thing to win it. If you're the best 30-plus-year-old black belt, that's still not a bad thing to have, not a bad medal to have. So a lot of really good guys went out and competed. From an MMA standpoint, the names that would stick out, we had Evan Dunham competing at black belt. He at least won one match. I only was able to find one match of his. He won that match, so I'm assuming he had at least a second one. So not sure where he finished in his division, but he didn't exactly look bad at all. He looked decent. And Gabriel Gonzaga ended up winning his division. So former UFC fighter, former UFC title challenger, was able to get that. But we also had some other guys who were just more well known within the jiu-jitsu community who did pretty well. So we had, let me just pull this up right quick. I know for sure we had Vitor Oliveira winning his 4th. But then there was also, I'm trying to think of some other guys. For the most part, when I was watching this, I was mostly watching for teammates rather than watching for just the best guys that were in the Masters tournament. Because like I said, usually for Worlds, that's when you're just trying to watch all the best guys. But Master Worlds, even though there is a lot of good jiu-jitsu, oftentimes you'll have some of the older guys at your gym that you'll want to watch and see. And so that's what I was spending a lot of time doing, was watching a lot of my teammates who went out to make the trip to Vegas and competed. That's who it is. Rafael Formiga Barbosa. That's the guy who got double gold. But he was another one who did really well from a jiu-jitsu standpoint. So for jiu-jitsu, they've got ADCC coming up next month. I'll be doing some previews for that, and then obviously doing some recaps after it's over. Very excited about that. That is, I would definitely say that's my favorite jiu-jitsu tournament out there. Worlds is pretty good as well. Worlds is the best, or Gi Worlds is the best for the Gi tournament. So that's the one that I was just talking about. That's in May. But for no Gi, ADCC, it comes every 2 years, and when it comes, boy, they get some really good brackets. So can't wait to see that. Even though there have been some people who've dropped out of there, it isn't as much as what happened with that IBJJF tournament. And like I mentioned, I'll get to it later. Next topic to talk about though is UFC China. So this is their big show that they're bringing out to China. A lot of names on this card that I'm not terribly familiar with, but that's sort of on purpose. One of the things that people have to understand with the UFC is that when you look at the guys who fill the bottom of the card, you're looking at people who are making 10,000 and 10,000. If you're also going to be paying travel visas for these guys, like that makes up a pretty big portion of what you're paying to have that fighter on the card. So oftentimes when they go to outside markets, or even if they're in the U.S., they like to fill the card with people who live in the same country, so they don't have to cover those travel visas. So that's one part of it, but the other part of it also is if you're in China and you're trying to build in China, it does help to have other Chinese people who you can build and get them some exposure. So for those two reasons, that's why there are a lot of names on this card that both I'm not terribly familiar, but I think most people would not be terribly familiar with. In the main event, we have Jessica Andrade versus Weili Zhang. Zhang has a few fights in the UFC. Her big fight that got her this title shot was a pretty dominant win over Tisha Torres, who's on a bit of a losing streak right now and just had a recent loss to Marina Rodriguez. Zhang is very physically strong. Seems decently technical from everywhere. Doesn't really strike me as being super impressive in her striking or super impressive in her grappling. Is very competent in both areas, but it seems as though her strength is something that really stands out of this division. The champion is also very similar in that regard, and that her strength also stands out quite a bit. Very strong takedowns, hits very hard. Not the most technical on the feet, but she can definitely hit hard when she does land. And then her jiu-jitsu, it's effective enough. She has enough situational awareness to like know how to avoid a lot of submissions and stay out of a lot of trouble while still being able to land her own shots. She had that fight with Claudia Gadelha where she was able to take Claudia, who's a very good black belt, down and stay out of trouble while still landing her own shots and dominating from top position. So as far as who I think is going to win this fight, it's tough because I don't feel like I know enough about Weili Zhang. I feel like she's one of those people where when you watch her, you see a lot of holes, but she's also really strong, and sometimes strength can fill those holes until you face someone who's really technical and really going to be able to push through that. I don't know that Jessica Andrade is that person. I would favor her in this fight, but to me, and I think a lot of people are saying you may not have heard of Weili Zhang, but she has a real shot at this. I think that's a fair sentiment, but to me, I still think Andrade is probably going to have the edge here. In the co-main event, we have Li Zhengliang versus Alessio Zaleski dos Santos. Zaleski dos Santos is that guy who's also known for his capoeira. Very exciting fighter out of Brazil. And then Zhengliang is a guy who's a pretty tough welterweight. He's had some good wins, had some not so great losses. The fight that sticks out to me kind of unfairly, I don't know that I would say it's unfair, but unfortunately for him, is the fight that he had with Jake Matthews where he was stuck in a guillotine and decided to just eye gouge him to defend it. So a little bit of a dirty fighter, but one of the more, I'd say probably the most successful Chinese men's fighter on the card or on the roster right now, so that's probably why he's the co-main event. We also have Kai Kara France versus Mark De La Rosa in a pretty good flyweight fight. Then we start getting some of the names that I'm not as familiar with. So we have Liu Zhenhong, who's 16-6, versus Movsar Evelev from Russia, who's 11-0. We have Wu Yanyan from China versus Mizuki Inoue of Japan. Wu is 10-2, Mizuki is 13-5. Then on the prelims, we have Song Kanan from China versus Derek Krantz. We have Jun Young Park from South Korea versus Anthony Hernandez. We have Su Muderji, again from China, versus Andre Sukumtat, who I'm surprised is still on the roster, but I guess good for him. He's a pretty nice guy, but has had a bit of a rough run in the bantamweight division. We have Da-Un Jung from South Korea versus Jamahal Hill. I'm assuming that's supposed to be Jamal, Jamahal. So Jab Mahal. I guess it's probably supposed to be pronounced Jamal. Weird spelling, but whatever. We have a pretty good match, at least in record, with Damir Ismagulov from Russia. He's 18-2 versus Thiago Moises, who's 12-3, very good jiu-jitsu. We have Carl Rosa versus Laura Procopio. And then we have, or I guess that'd be Carol then. And then we have Alateng Heli, who's 12-7-1 versus Batjarel Dana. So yeah, like I mentioned, not a lot of huge names on the card. I have a feeling that some of these people, even if they get a win, they're probably not going to show up on a UFC card again until the UFC goes back to Asia just for travel expenses. But it'll still be interesting. I'm sure these guys, it's a great opportunity for them to show up on the UFC or show up on a stage this big in the UFC. They don't know if they're going to get an opportunity like this again, so even if you don't know them by name, there's a good chance that their performances are going to stick out and they're going to be at least fun fights to watch. On to the next topic, though, we have USA Wrestling. So, as I mentioned last week, Alex Derringer and Kyle Dake fought for one of the remaining spots on the team, or wrestled for one of the remaining spots, and Kyle Dake was able to get the win there. Derringer, who is arguably the second best guy in the world, is left off the world team. We have a similar situation, although it's not as severe here, with Yianni Giacomo and Zain Rutherford. Both of these guys are good enough to compete at the World Championships. Only one of them's going to be allowed to because you can only have one American. Yianni won a big tournament in Yasser Dogu. He also had a win over Zain Rutherford in that tournament. Zain is a former Hodge Trophy winner, multiple-time national champion, Division I at Penn State. He had beaten Yianni in the first match of what was called Final X, which is basically the end of the qualification process for USA Wrestling. Was losing in the second match, but after a late review, he ended up getting the win there. So in winning best 2 out of 3, he had earned a spot on the team, or he thought he earned a spot on the team. But there were some rules that were broken in terms of how that challenge was done. The challenge was called way too late. So Yianni and his team ended up reviewing that, and USA Wrestling decided to void the second match. So now they're going to be competing on Labor Day in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, for that spot. So what's going to have to happen here is Zain still has the win in the first match. So for Zain, he just needs to win one of the next two matches, and he makes the team. Yianni has to win both matches. So Yianni has to win match 2 to make it 1-1, and then win match 3 to make it 2-1. If Yianni wins match 1, or wins the first match there, it'll be 1-1. And then if Zain wins the next one, even though it would be 1-1 on the day, Zain would therefore be 2-1, and therefore Zain would have the spot on the team. So Yianni needs to win 2 in a row without taking a loss to Zain Rutherford, which isn't exactly going to be easy. Although there is talk of Zain being injured, and with the World Championships actually being in September, I guess if you're too injured to compete at your best early September, I don't know if you're going to be able to compete at your best late September. So maybe it's fair, maybe it's unfair, but either way, this is going to be a really big match, and once we get closer to it, I'll talk about it again, and then after the match happens, we'll talk about the results. A couple other smaller MMA stories. After Daniel Cormier lost, he did this thing that it seems like every other fighter seems to feel it's necessary to do, which kind of annoys me, which is post a big long post on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or any other social media site and basically just apologize, like, oh, I'm sorry I let you guys all down. And the thing is like, every time that there's a fight, one person's going to lose and one person's going to win. So it's a guarantee that on any card with 12 fights, there's going to be 12 people who lose. Like, we get it, people lose, it's okay. You don't need to apologize to me. Like, unless you did something severely wrong, like, unless you, like, cheated in the fight or tried to cheat in the fight or gave a poor effort, then maybe at that point you can say, okay, look, I did something wrong, but it looked like Daniel tried his hardest, so to me, he doesn't owe anyone an apology. Sure as hell doesn't owe me an apology, but he posted one anyway. And Chael Sonnen had a little video where he was saying, hey, look, Daniel, you do not need to apologize. I'm not going to accept your apology because we saw what you did. You did things the right way. Like, don't apologize to us, but you don't need to do that. So as far as Chael's point on that, like I mentioned before, I'm not a big fan of apologies. If you want to do it, I'm not going to, like, fault you for it, but at the same token, like, I don't need to see it, and I'm not really that interested in seeing it. And anytime I see a news story like X fighter released a statement following loss, I just don't even click on it. I don't care. Like, there's nothing to learn there. Oftentimes they're all worded the same anyway. It's all like, oh, my coaches, my family, my friends, sorry I let you down. Like, no, you really didn't let anyone down. We get it. People lose. Every time there's a fight card, half the people who show up to fight end up leaving with a loss. Like, it's okay. We get it. But then also recently he also lost his father, so really rough week for him in terms of losing his heavyweight title and also losing his father. I guess in one sense it's nice that he was able to accomplish so much with his father still around. He was able to make the Olympic team a couple of times. He was able to make a bunch of world teams in wrestling. He was able to win the UFC light heavyweight title. He was able to win the UFC heavyweight title. So there was a lot of great things that he was able to do with his father still in his life. It's unfortunate that his father, the last fight that he sees his son in is him losing his heavyweight title, but there were a lot of great times too, and it sucks to see it. No one likes losing a parent. No one likes seeing anyone lose a parent. So for him, you just hope for the best. Hope that he's able to take his time here, both in terms of whether or not he wants to come back to the sport, but then also take his time in mourning his father's loss. So rough week for him, but anyone who looks down on him for losing or wants to judge him right now and give him crap while he's in such a rough time, just back off. There's no need for it. He seems like he's a pretty good guy, and he's just going through some hard times right now. And then the last thing to talk about would be that Demian Maia versus Ben Askren fight. I brought it up on a few different podcasts. I don't really feel like I need to go too deep into it again. But this fight that pretty much anyone who really likes grappling has been waiting for and just hoping for a while. Even before Ben Askren was brought to the UFC, it was a fight that people wanted to see for a long time. We're going to get it. It's going to be the main event in Singapore on October 26th. As far as whether this fight's going to be a really shitty striking match or whether it's going to be a really good grappling match, that remains to be seen. Demian Maia has fought. The thing with the Jake Shields fight is that Jake Shields is actually, like, immersed himself in jiu-jitsu a lot more than Ben Askren has. So as far as people thinking that this fight could potentially look like the Jake Shields fight, where Shields just takes him down and stays on top, maintains top position, and just avoids getting caught up in anything, is it possible that Ben Askren could do that? That he could take Demian Maia down and be able to wrestle his way out of a lot of sweep attempts and just kill the clock and be able to score enough points to win? Maybe. I think if they end up standing up, for the most part, Demian Maia's got better boxing than him. There was a period of Demian Maia's career where Demian decided that he wanted to actually work on his striking. That sort of worked against him in a fight like the Nate Marquardt fight, but at least he has that. So if he needs to draw on that, it's there. Whereas with Ben Askren, he's always wanted to wrestle people. He's always been a wrestler. Even while he was fighting in one, and even when he was retired from one, he was still working with his wrestling camps and still, like, teaching wrestling, but the striking never really was there, and it seems as though even now that he's fighting in the UFC, that he's not really spending a whole lot of time working on his striking. So if they end up having to fall back on their striking, I think Maia has more to work with than Askren does here. But if it goes to grappling, I mean, there are ways that Askren can play it where he's able to play the clock and use that against Demian Maia and just try to outpoint him. But if there are long exchanges, the longer they're on the ground, the more that's going to favor Demian Maia. But I can't wait to watch this fight. Hope it doesn't end up being a shitty striking match. If it does, then there's something kind of interesting in that. Just worth watching Ben Askren actually have to fight a striking fight. In a way, you kind of have to see Demian Maia do that too. But if it becomes a grappling match, then that's where everyone's going to get their money's worth and they're going to get what they want, and that's what I'm hoping we get to see there. So that covers it for this week. Next week I'll be back again with the recap of UFC China. We'll also be previewing the UFC Abu Dhabi card. If anything else comes up within the week, I'm sure I'll cover that as well. I'm not sure if there's anything that's to be expected at that point. Doesn't seem like there's any big jiu-jitsu tournaments coming up. There's like a fight to win and a Grapple Fest event, but those aren't really that major. For wrestling, doesn't seem like there's anything too big coming up there either. I don't think there's going to be any huge news that drops. So it seems like it's mostly just going to be UFC related stuff next week, but that's what we will be looking forward to. Just a note, if you're watching the video, you've probably seen this flashing throughout the screen. If you're just listening to the podcast, just to mention, I do put up videos on YouTube and BitChute. Those include the podcast, but they also include singular clips just talking about other stuff throughout the week. Have the podcast on Apple Podcasts, have it on Anchor, which also sends it through to a bunch of other podcast services like Google Podcasts, it's on Podbean, Spotify, and a few others. So if you search for it, chances are it's there. And then I'm also on Twitter at @the_MMA_rundown. So you can find me there as well. So that'll cover it for this week, and hopefully we get some good fights, and I'll be back next week to talk to you about those.